Welcome back, everybody, to the Time Cave on a Thursday. That's right, we're back. We're going to be doing some lantern content. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for being so supportive and understanding over the last couple of weeks. I really do appreciate it. It's been a very interesting time to navigate. This year has definitely been one special, challenging year for a great many of us. You know, I'm not alone in that. I know a great deal of my friends have experienced any sort of, hardship from one degree to another. I didn't expect to lose my mom this year, and it's safe to say all of us that have lost a parent never expect it. In my mom's case, with her lack of health attention, she had her sources, but they were definitely more, I would say, alternative. But regardless, I've just been meditating on a lot of things, and meditating on growing up, having those times with my mom, and just remembering the good times and things that we all shared, and the jokes that were said, and everything like that. So that's been helping. It's been helping me get through this, and also, of course, a lovely, wonderful person that's been also a huge support to myself and my father and my family. And she's been just amazing, and her availability and her support. And I know she's watching. You know who you are. Thank you so much, and I love you very much. Yes. So, yeah. Anyways, I want to thank all of you guys for your wonderful outpouring of support. Your comments have really touched me, and it goes a long way. So, for you guys, I am, going to be sharing some fun things with us today. I'm going to be getting back into the content that we've all come to know and understand and appreciate about this channel. And it's nothing that you haven't seen before, but some things that you haven't seen in a while, and also some history and interpretations of what these things are and why they exist. And I hope that we can all have a fun day today. And we're going to try and lighten things up. We've been somber for the last couple of weeks, and I understand why, and I appreciate your sympathy. I really do. It does go a long way. But we're going to try and get back on track here and share the things that make us happy, and that's what my mother would want for us all, of course. So we're going to celebrate us being together right here, right now, in the Time Cave, as we've done for a good many years now. 6+ years. Wow. Crazy, I know. It's hard to think that I've been doing this for that many years. Wow. Anyways, we have two special ladies here on the bench. That's right. What do you mean ladies, Rob? They're lanterns. They're not ladies. Well, they are elegant tubulars. They're sophisticated, and they're elegant, and they are attractive, are they not? Yes. Well, stepping up to the plate, first one here on deck is the Winfield Good Enough. That's right. This round tube, crinkle-cornered glass fount lantern, see, it's got little porthole windows. Isn't that charming? Dates to about the maybe early mid-90s. Yeah. Earlier Winfields did not have the inside crinkle corner stamping, okay? That was not a thing. I'd say probably mid-90s, right around there. But before Winfield added the bail and hooked it to the air tubes, this is mounted in the center of the draft tube, just underneath the draft tube cap. This design was one of the earlier designs in the 80s and through the early 90s, I would believe. But anyways, this is a beautiful lantern. I purchased it last year or so. Great piece. I love it. We're going to light it. But next on the bench here, next on deck, is the Dietz Crystal. 1893 4 era, maybe up to 96. Single wire. This is the second generation Dietz Crystal. First generation Dietz Crystal actually was a crosswire guard, but it had a square lift. So it had the little tab on top, and you pull it up like a square lift tubular. That would be the very first generation because, well, the side lift right here wasn't around. It wasn't a thing yet prior. So 1890, square tube lanterns came out, and they introduced the glass fount as well as other tubulars from Dietz around 1890. Okay, and they did not have the side lift or the Victor at that point. They had the square lift. They had, I think, the OK tubular, and they had the Crystal was, you know, just brand new on the scene. They had a few other tubulars. They were still offering from the tail end of the 80s. But once the square tube design came out, they really abandoned the round tube design, except for, I think, on the Dietz Special. Yeah. Or, no, not the Dietz Special. Excuse me. It's the Dietz Best. There was a very brief period where the Dietz Best did get a square tube treatment, but it went back to the round tube and kind of had the Dietz Fire King frame, essentially. But you also had the Ironclad and the Mill Lantern or the Dewey, all those guys. Yeah, but yeah, the square tube design came out right about 90. And I know that they have patents going back to the 80s on the draft tube on most of these. But those patents are pertaining to certain elements that carried over from the 80s, from the, you know, the lift wire and the other lanterns that Dietz offered in the 80s into as early as the late 70s. But this Dietz Crystal is definitely a favorite lantern. It is quite a piece. It is, and I love it very much. I had another crystal lantern. I had a SG&L, which was my very first one, if you remember correctly. But I let it go. Why would you let it go, Rob? Well, because I had something else I wanted. I wanted to buy something very expensive and beautiful, and I sold it to a collector that's on the group. That's right. And it's his, and he loves it, and I know where it's at. But yeah, I don't regret selling that SG&L. It was a beautiful piece, and had a marked globe and all that stuff. But you know, it's being enjoyed, and I'm okay with that. Yes, I am. But here we are, glass fount lanterns. So what is the deal with a glass fount lantern? Why did they make a tubular lantern with a glass fount? You may ask. Well, for me, it's an obvious decision. You can actually see what level of, fuel you have. That was one of the greatest advantages of this, because like here on the Winfield, you have these little windows on there, and you could see what fuel you had. So if you were going to light up for the night, you could check to see how much fuel you had, and you could add fuel accordingly. So that was definitely one of the major benefits of having a glass fount tubular. Also, doesn't rust. Glass does not rust. No, it will get stained by rust sometimes, but it will not rot out and fall apart like a tinned fount. Now, of course, lanterns did exist as early as the 1890s by Dietz and SG&L, that they added a copper bottom plate to some of their side lift or Victor lanterns. You could order just the bottom cap on the fount or the entire fount to be made of copper. And those exist. There are some examples out there. I've seen them turn up. I think collector and friend, John Chittum has a copper fount Victor, or is it a 1B Royal? It's a very obscure, rare SG&L that has an entire copper fount. Square tube era. It's mid 1890s, I would say. But yeah, the challenge of having a lantern, you know, that would eventually rust out and you couldn't fuel it anymore and use it was a real thing even back in those days. And for what it's worth, these lanterns were great for, you know, having on the farm, using them for outside uses, or walking around the house at night after everything's been, you know, turned out or whatever. But I mean, there was definitely many applications to use a tubular lantern on one's personal property. However, that wasn't where the bulk of the money was being made, was it? No, it wasn't. It was used, well, they were used by contractors, construction crews, utilities, and all of that. So a lot of public works programs in the 19th century, any kind of utility, when they were laying gas line for gas lighting for streets or homes, when they were plumbing all that, or even, you know, hydro plumbing or water, when indoor plumbing became a thing in certain parts of the city, mind you. And any type of utility, they were using these to light up a work area at night, and also for road construction or road grading or whatever. And a lot of roads were very much dirt, but they still had to level them off, and there was still things that were being used at night, or work that was being done at night, that had to require these things. Of course, farmers had a need for these early in the morning before the sun came up, or late at night, or whatever the case may be. But you had mining operations, you had, you know, timber mills, you had all these different type of jobs that required lighting. And so they would sell a lot of lanterns to these different companies or different contractors or whatever that needed to light their work area if they were working into the night, or have them hung out as a warning light for any particular reason, you know, to keep people away if they needed to do that because of a dangerous area. So, yeah, they would be left outside a lot of times, and they would be in the elements, and they would get rusty. So the glass was definitely something that wouldn't rust out. So, yeah, same with the copper. Copper doesn't rust. It will oxidize, but it doesn't rust. So these came out right around the early 90s. I'd say 90, 91, right at the cusp of the start of the 1890s. Now, were there glass fount lanterns prior to that? I would say there was. Who was the very first company to introduce a glass fount tubular? That's a good question. I don't think I actually have the answer for that, but I would say, if I had to take an educated guess, I would say Winfield. Friend and collector Brian DeRose has a very early glass fount Winfield, and I would say that it hails from the late 1880s. I could be wrong. It could be right on the cusp of 1892, but 1890 as well as these. But anyhow, you get it. The thing is, there were several companies that made glass fount lanterns. Yeah, there were. And I think there's only a very short list of companies that didn't, or at least that we haven't seen any examples yet. So the companies that offered a glass fount lantern would be, of course, Dietz. And you had C.T. Ham. And you had Winfield. You had Mayrose. I wish I had a Mayrose. But those are very expensive and very rare, and only a very short list of collectors have actually handled glass fount Mayrose lanterns. Collector Dustin Lloyd had one that was very similar to a Dietz crystal, but it had an armored jacket over the fount with these square windows. Really very specific. Lantern Joe, or Joe Bakanowski in Connecticut, now owns that piece. It's a one of a kind. It's the only one known to exist. It's unobtainium for sure. It really is. We have not found any other examples similar to it. So there probably are other examples out there, but they're just hiding currently in other private collections that have not been shared yet. But anyhow, Winfield, I would say, was probably the very first lantern company to introduce a glass fount, but I can't say that is accurate. That's just from my own observations. But other companies that offered a glass fount was also NCL. That's right, the Nail City Lantern and Stamping Company out of West Virginia offered a glass fount. So you had your crank tubular, like this guy up here, right? Oh, come on now. So you had your crank tubulars. But imagine this with two little windows right in front. They made a glass fount of this. That's right. They did. And they're very rare. And they do turn up. They do surface. But I think there's maybe 2 or 3 that are known to exist. Yeah, that's right. They're very rare. But when NCL became Wheeling Stamping Company around the turn of the last century in 1900, 1903, Paul's introduced, also offered a glass fount lantern, and those are pretty rare as well. So a lot of the other manufacturers that offered glass fount lanterns are very, very rare. Very hard to find. Very hard to find. The ones that you can find with a little more ease would be the Dietz. Dietz and also CT Ham glass fount lanterns would be definitely the easier ones to procure and source out and find and own. Because Dietz made this lantern, the crystal. They made the crystal from, I'd say 1890, all the way up into about 1915, give or take. It was in their catalogs. Now, Madison Kirkman and Woody Kirkman, out with Kirkman Lanterns down in Ramona, California, had a crystal from a customer that they were fixing and repairing that was date stamped 1942. So essentially that would be like a late run Victor, but with a glass fount. Naturally, it was a crystal. In all intents and purposes, it was a very late run crystal with, reinforcements on the air tubes like a, post 20s Dietz Victor. But they only saw the one. So I would say that Dietz was still filling orders for whatever lantern somebody wanted. So if you ordered a Dietz crystal, they would make it. They still had some of the tooling to stamp out the parts to make a crystal, even as late as the 1940s. But the definite window of manufacture of the Dietz crystal would be 90 through the early 1910s. I think it was dropped from the catalog right around 1914, 1915, and that's what Woody Kirkman says in the Lantern Net database for Dietz. But anyways, they made it for a long time, and Winfield made them as well. They made them clear into the early 1900s. They went to the Clipper. They went into the Monarch frame era, where they were round tubes that were stamped out and crimped together like the early Monarchs. And so Winfield did continue to make their glass fount into 1910 or just prior 1910. So yeah, they're out there, but they look a lot like CT Ham lanterns. So a lot of people have actually mistaken the Winfield examples for CT Ham. Now they made the bottom lift as well as a side lift. So the glass fount Winfields of that generation, the lift lever would go straight through the air tube, kind of like the Cyclone, exactly like the Cyclone. So you had the crank with the little pivot, the little round pivot, little slot there for the crank, and then the wire actually would go right through the air tube and come out the other side. So if you find a glass fount that looks like a ham but it has the lift wire going right through the air tube, then it's a Winfield for sure. Also, of course, check the stamping on the fount. It should say Winfield or W.MWCO for Winfield Manufacturing Company. Anyhow, those are the ones that are out there that I've seen sold. CT Ham's glass founts are beautiful. They made them as early as Dietz did, right around the early 90s. And they're gorgeous. They had the side spring version. They had the inside mounted wire guards, like the side spring safeties, which was the triple S. They also made them with the side lift, like the Clipper lift. And then they also went into the round tube era of the Monarch frame, as they call it, clear up into, I would say, maybe 1910. I don't know when CTM discontinued their glass fount lantern. I think it was before Dietz did, because, well, Dietz eventually bought CTM in 1914, and that's because the Charles Trafton's Ham's son was the president at the time. His father passed away in the early 1900s. But yeah, his son was president of the company, and then when he passed on, then they sold the company to Dietz in 1914. And that's the information that I was given and that I've learned. So I would almost say, since I haven't seen a glass fount from Ham that post-dates like 1907, 1908, I'd say that they did stop before Dietz stopped making the glass fount. But yeah, the glass fount lanterns, they're very desirable. People love them because they're very unique. They are heavier. This glass fount is not light. It's fairly thick glass and has to be durable and stand up to whatever kind of punishment that would come its way on a job site. But I mean, we have a retaining ring. We have this elegant little orbital ring here that's nicely soldered and bracketed to the fount skirt, which is removable. This all comes apart. Yeah, you can unclip it here, and drop the base, and then you can access the glass fount so you can remove it, clean it, or whatever, or replace it if it gets broken. Now that's a very hard thing to do today, because nobody makes a replacement. Now, I know the Kirkmans they had one listed in their catalog, but they never did actually manufacture or have one made through their glass connections. They have a company that they've used for making glass globes for their brand, but I don't think they actually did ever have a glass fount made for crystals, which would have been great because they are in very, very short supply. But at some point they might, who knows. It might not be profitable. It might cost more money to have them made than it would be profitable to fill the orders of those who are missing a glass fount. Now, if they did take the measurements of glass founts that are unmarked for CT Ham or NCL or the other glass founts that are very rare, they are all probably going to be a little different sizes. It wouldn't be very profitable to make a glass fount just for an NCL or a CT Ham or whatever. But anyhow, whatever the case is, it would be nice to have a replacement. So if you found one with a broken fount or a cracked fount or one that's missing entirely, you could order one and have it restored to operate and be complete again. This lantern in particular, when I got it off of eBay, I paid $100 for it. It was missing the guard wire. It was missing the lift lever, and the glass fount was broken all on the inside on the top. Actually, I think I still have it over here. But anyhow, it was broken and you couldn't see it, and I didn't get any answers about the fount. I asked if it was intact and they didn't say anything, but I bought for $100. I thought, what the heck? I'll take a roll of the dice. And I got it. When I took it out, then I discovered beyond in here, it was all destroyed. And I did eventually use the lantern as was. I just didn't move it. So I would feel it and just use it as it was and not move it around because it would slosh and make a big fat mess if I did. But then I did find I put out a want ad on the group, and someone had a good glass fount with the hardware, and they sold it to me for more than I paid for the lantern itself. But it was like $135, something, 150 shipped. Yeah. So in all intents and purposes, I thought that was a fair deal because you can't get them. So anyone that has a spare probably got it out of a rusty crystal that wasn't worth saving. They kept the glass. Very smart. Yeah, it was worth the price. Put it together now with the correct parts. All here at present, I found the correct parts and I put it all together. And so now I have a complete original crystal, because that is a vintage fount and the parts are vintage. They come off of other lanterns that were being parted out. Everything's legitimate. Everything's correct. So, yeah, it's not a phony baloney. It's a legitimate Dietz crystal from the early 90s. But the investment, originally $100 investment, plus $150 for the fount, plus $40 for the orbital guard, and another $25 for the side lift crank. All the parts, we're looking at over $300 invested. Yeah. Close to it, I guess. Yeah. Sorry, it's Thursday. I'm not paid to think this day. But anyways, if I ever wanted to sell it, I know I could definitely recuperate my money and get some more on top of that, because these are very popular examples, the early 90s versions. The Winfield, I paid a good price for that from a friend, and yeah, it's not going anywhere. But if I wanted to, I know I could easily recuperate my money for what I invested in it. But then again, why? I love it. It's a nice piece. It's a good lantern, and I enjoy it very much. They're the two glass founts I have. I know some people that have multiple generations of glass fount lanterns, mostly Dietz, of course, because those are more common, or the SG&L. That's the other company I forgot to mention that made a glass fount, was Steam Gauge and Lantern Company. But then again, they were, at the time in the 90s, they had, they were a sister company, since Dietz had holdings with SG&L. They were very much the same. They had mimic or mirrored models. Slight differences between the two, but they were making the same lanterns essentially. So Dietz and SG&L were one of the same at that point. But yeah, it's fun stuff. It's cool. It's interesting. It's different. And they are out there. Don't get depressed if you can't find one right away. Or if you find one on eBay and it's going for a lot of money. I know there's one on eBay right now. It needs some work. It has a broken fuel cap on there. The collar is broken, but I think you can find these brass collars with fuel caps that are on, domestic lamps, oil lamps that are glass fount oil lamps for the home. Some of them have the same hardware on there. So if you find one on eBay for very cheap, then you can just take the hardware off of it and replace it with some plaster, because I think they were connected to the glass spout with a plaster. But anyhow, you decide. You look it up on eBay, see if that's something you want to go after. It's probably early 1900s generation. It's like 1901, 1902, give or take, era of crystal that's on there right now. It has a really nice patina, though. I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, man, that is pretty nice. But I have this, and I'm happy with it. Well, friends, we're running a little late for today. But I thought I owed you some fun lantern content because of the last couple of weeks and me dealing with my business and dealing with my mom, and we will be sending her off on the 6th of September, and yeah, it's gonna be a tough day, but I know it's gonna bring a lot of closure, and I know she's at peace and rest. So, but again, thank you so much for your condolences and the wonderful messages I've been receiving in the comments pertaining to that. And I do truly appreciate it. And you guys are the best. You really are. So, that being said, thanks again. Thanks for being there. Thanks for continuing to watch and support the channel. And I wouldn't be doing this continually if I didn't have your support and your viewership. So, thanks again for participating. And we will come at you next week with another lantern-related video. And we'll talk about something different. Some other history lantern related. So yeah, stay tuned, guys, and have a great Labor Day weekend. Bye-bye. Sit, boo-boo, sit. Good dog.